Ma'am, deliveries go around the back. The words landed in the marble lobby like a slap nobody wanted to acknowledge out loud. At exactly 7:12 p.m., under the gold chandeliers of the Belmont Crest Hotel in downtown Chicago, every conversation seemed to pause for half a second before pretending nothing had happened. Naomi Whittaker didn't move. She stood there in a cream-colored sweater, tailored black slacks, and low leather heels still damp from the cold spring rain outside. No designer logos. No jewelry loud enough to announce status. Just a quiet black woman carrying a slim leather folder beneath her arm, while a 6'2" white security chief blocked the entrance like she was trespassing in her own city. Derek Lawson folded his hands in front of him, posture rigid, eyes already certain about who she was before she ever spoke. Private event upstairs, he added flatly. Guests only. Naomi lifted her gaze slowly. Calm eyes. Steady breathing. The kind of composure people often mistook for weakness right before they regretted it. I'm here for a meeting, she said softly. Derek glanced at her shoes, then at the rainwater still clinging to her coat sleeve. Then somebody gave you the wrong address. A couple near the concierge desk looked over. One man smirked into his whiskey glass. Another guest lowered her phone slightly, sensing tension spreading through the lobby like static before a storm. Naomi had seen this look before. 23 years old in Atlanta when a luxury retailer followed her through every aisle. 29 in Dallas when a real estate broker assumed she was housekeeping during a commercial property tour she was financing. Different cities, different faces, same quiet certainty that she did not belong. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Naomi. The Belmont Crest smelled like polished cedar and expensive perfume. Soft piano music floated through the air while wealthy guests crossed the lobby without interruption. Naomi stood completely still. In the middle of it, treated like the only person who required permission to exist there. At the front desk, Claire Bennett finally looked up from her monitor. Blonde hair tied tight. Expression tighter. Problem? She asked Derek without even acknowledging Naomi directly. Claims she has an executive meeting upstairs, Derek replied. Claims. One word. Enough to shift the room against her. Claire typed lazily into the reservation system, barely pretending to search. Nothing under Whittaker, she said. You sure you're not at the wrong hotel? Naomi looked directly at the glowing screen behind the counter. Her name was there. She could see it reflected faintly in the glass monitor shield. Executive Board Dinner. Whittaker Holdings. Penthouse Conference Suite. Claire saw it too, and clicked away anyway. That was the moment the lobby changed. Not because of shouting, not because Naomi reacted, but because everyone standing nearby realized this wasn't confusion anymore. It was choice. Derek stepped closer, lowering his voice like false politeness somehow softened humiliation. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time to leave peacefully. Naomi turned her eyes toward him slowly. The rain outside tapped against the towering windows while the elevator doors opened behind them with a soft chime. And I'm going to give you one chance, she said quietly, to rethink what happens in the next 6 minutes. The elevator doors opened with a soft metallic whisper behind Naomi Whittaker, but nobody moved toward them. The entire lobby remained frozen around Derek Lawson like his permission determined who deserved luxury and who did not. He stared at Naomi for a long second, searching her face for irritation, embarrassment, anything he could use to justify what was happening. But she gave him nothing. No raised voice. No nervous explanation. Just stillness. And somehow that unsettled him more. Claire Bennett cleared her throat behind the front desk and forced a tight smile meant more for the surrounding guests than Naomi herself. Ma'am, if there has been some misunderstanding, you can contact reservations during normal business hours. Naomi turned slightly toward her. The meeting started 12 minutes ago. Claire shrugged lightly. Then I guess they moved on without you. A low chuckle came from the lounge bar near the windows. Martin Cole swirled the ice in his drink, watching the scene unfold like entertainment purchased with his room rate. Expensive navy suit. Silver cufflinks. Wedding ring polished enough to catch chandelier light. These places are getting too relaxed, he muttered to the man beside him. People walking off the street and think confidence makes them belong. Naomi heard him. So did everyone else. But she remained calm, standing beneath the massive crystal lights while rain streaked down the windows behind her like slow-moving shadows. The Belmont crest prided itself on elegance, on discretion, on making wealthy guests feel protected from discomfort. Tonight, discomfort had become the entire lobby. Near the concierge station, a young employee named Emily Parker glanced nervously between Naomi and the reservation monitor in front of Claire. Emily was 24, barely 6 months into the job, still young enough to believe policies were supposed to protect people instead of humiliate them. She looked again at the screen. Whitaker Holdings. Penthouse Conference Suite. Executive authorization attached. Emily swallowed hard. Claire, she said carefully, the reservation is there. Claire did not even look at her. Stay in your lane, Emily. Derek folded his arms tighter across his chest. This is exactly why security exists, he announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. You let one person fake confidence, and suddenly they think they own the building. Naomi finally shifted her weight slightly, leather folder still tucked calmly beneath her arm. Interesting choice of words, she said softly. Derek smirked. Look, I deal with situations like this every week. Situations like this. Not misunderstandings. Not guests. Situations. Emily looked visibly uncomfortable now. Across the lobby, a young black man wearing a University of Michigan jacket slowly lifted his phone toward the scene. His name was Jalen Brooks, 26 years old, in Chicago for a tech conference, and already recognizing exactly what kind of moment this was becoming. Naomi noticed him immediately. Please do not record, she said gently. Jalen hesitated. But they are treating you wrong. I know, Naomi replied. Use your voice when the time comes. Not your camera. That answer silenced him faster than anger ever could. Meanwhile, Claire leaned closer toward Derek and lowered her voice, though not low enough. Call backup before she starts causing a scene. Naomi almost smiled at that. She had not raised her voice once. Had barely moved. Yet somehow she was already being framed as the disruption instead of the people humiliating her publicly inside a 5-star hotel. Derek reached for the radio clipped near his shoulder. Lobby assistance requested, he said. Possible trespassing issue. The words echoed softly through the polished marble space while several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Emily looked back at Naomi again, and for the first time she noticed something strange. Naomi was not nervous. She was measuring the room, measuring people, measuring time. Then Naomi slowly lifted her phone and checked the screen. 5 minutes left. The second security officer arrived less than 30 seconds later, and somehow the air inside the Belmont crest became even heavier. His name tag read Connor Blake. Mid-40s. Broad shoulders. Former military posture. He walked into the lobby, already assuming Derek was right before hearing a single word. That was the thing about places like this. Confidence traveled faster when it wore the right skin. Derek pointed toward Naomi with the casual certainty of a man directing someone toward a spill on the floor. She refuses to leave. Naomi glanced briefly toward the towering windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Rainwater shimmered against the glass while headlights crawled through the streets below. The city kept moving. Inside the lobby, time felt pinned in place. Connor stepped closer. Ma'am, if staff asked you to leave, you need to cooperate. Naomi looked at him calmly. Did anyone explain why? Connor hesitated for half a second. Derek answered instead. No reservation. No credentials. Suspicious behavior. Emily Parker inhaled sharply behind the concierge station. That is not true, she said quietly. Claire shot her a warning glare sharp enough to stop most people cold. Emily. But Emily did not back down this time. She looked directly at Connor. Her meeting is registered upstairs. Derek laughed once under his breath. You are new here, so let me help you out. Fake names hit systems all the time. Martin Cole raised his glass slightly from the lounge bar, like he was watching a private show. Exactly, he added. These scammers know how to look convincing now. Naomi finally turned toward him fully. You decided what I was the second I walked in. Martin smirked. No, I decided when security had to stop you. The distinction hung in the air like smoke. Around them, more guests had quietly slowed their movement through the lobby. Nobody wanted to admit they were watching, but everybody was. Jalen Brooks stepped forward slightly now, phone lowered at his side. She has been calm this entire time, he said. You all are treating her like she committed a crime for walking through the front door. Claire folded her arms. Sir, We are trying to protect our guests. Naomi almost smiled at that word. Protect. It was always protect. Protect the atmosphere. Protect the image. Protect wealthy people from the discomfort of seeing someone black exist confidently in spaces they considered exclusive. Connor shifted uneasily now, sensing the room beginning to divide. Emily leaned toward her monitor again, fingers trembling slightly over the keyboard. There is an executive authorization attached, she whispered. Claire immediately stepped in front of the screen. Enough. Then she lowered her voice so only Emily could hear. You want to lose this job tonight. Naomi watched the exchange without moving. The calm in her face no longer looked passive. It looked dangerous, controlled, like someone holding the final page of a story nobody else had read yet. Derek noticed it too. That unsettled him more than anger ever could. Ma'am, he said more sharply now. Last warning. Naomi slowly placed her leather folder onto the marble counter beside her. The sound echoed softly through the silent lobby. Interesting, she said. Quietly. Nobody asked who I was. You only decided who I could not be. Connor looked away first. Derek did not. People like you always say that when they get caught. Emily froze. Jalen muttered under his breath. Wow. Even Martin stopped smiling for a second after hearing those 4 words. People like you. Too direct. Too ugly to hide behind policy now. Naomi reached calmly into her coat pocket and removed her phone again. She checked the time. 4 minutes left. Then she made a call. Olivia, she said softly the moment the line connected. Activate the Crescent file. The moment Naomi Whitaker spoke the words, activate the Crescent file, something invisible shifted inside the Belmont Crest lobby. Not loudly, not dramatically, but the kind of shift people feel before they understand it. Olivia Grant answered immediately on the other end of the call, her voice calm and efficient through the speaker. Understood. Legal is standing by. Final signatures are prepared. Derek Lawson laughed softly like he had just heard the world's weakest bluff. Legal, he repeated. You think fancy words are going to scare anybody here. Naomi ended the call without responding. That silence irritated him more than an argument ever could. Claire Bennett straightened a stack of papers at the front desk, trying to restore normalcy to a room that no longer felt normal. Guests were openly staring now. The piano music drifting through the ceiling speakers suddenly sounded distant and artificial, like background noise in a collapsing illusion. Emily Parker could barely keep her eyes off Naomi. The more she watched her, the less this looked like a woman cornered by security, and the more it looked like someone allowing people to expose themselves one sentence at a time. Connor Blake shifted near Derek and lowered his voice. Maybe we should just verify upstairs. Derek shook his head immediately. That is how scams work. Hesitate once, and suddenly everybody thinks policy is optional. Naomi looked toward Connor instead of Derek. You know this is wrong. Connor did not answer, but he also did not meet her eyes. That was answer enough. Across the lobby, Martin Cole finished the last sip of his drink and walked closer, drawn toward the tension like men often are when they think power belongs to them. You know what your problem is? He asked Naomi casually. You walked in here expecting people to believe you without proof. Naomi tilted her head slightly. Interesting. Martin smirked. What is? Nobody asked the men upstairs for proof they belonged here tonight. The sentence hit harder than anybody expected. Emily looked down immediately. Jalen Brooks let out a quiet breath through his nose. Even Connor looked uncomfortable now. Claire stepped in quickly, voice sharpened by panic hiding beneath professionalism. This conversation is over. Security will escort you out if necessary. Naomi slowly turned toward her. Necessary for who? Claire opened her mouth, but stopped. Because there it was again. The problem they could all feel now, but nobody wanted to name out loud. Naomi was not aggressive, not disruptive, not threatening. The only thing making her dangerous to them was the fact that she refused to shrink. Derek stepped forward again, impatience cracking through his polished authority. Ma'am, I am done asking politely. Then he reached toward Naomi's arm. Not violently, not enough to leave harm, but enough. Enough for the entire lobby to feel the line being crossed. Naomi looked down at his hand briefly. The air around her seemed to freeze. And suddenly she was not standing in Chicago anymore. She was 19 years old again outside a hotel in Charlotte, watching her mother hold back tears after being told they did not fit the atmosphere of the restaurant inside. Naomi still remembered the rain that night. Her mother standing under a flickering streetlight, saying quietly, Never beg people to see your humanity. If they need convincing, they already failed. The memory passed in seconds. Back in the Belmont Crest, Derek finally removed his hand, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it. Emily spoke before fear could stop her. Do not touch her again. Claire turned instantly. Emily, enough. But Emily's voice grew steadier now. No. Her reservation is real. You all know it is. Derek stared at Naomi with open irritation now, the mask slipping. Women like you always turn simple situations into drama. The sentence landed like broken glass across the marble floor. Jalen muttered, wow, under his breath. Martin looked away this time. Connor exhaled slowly. And Naomi checked the time on her phone once more. 2 minutes left. The lobby had gone so quiet that the soft ticking of the chandelier crystals almost sounded loud. Nobody moved anymore. Guests stood frozen beside leather chairs and marble columns, pretending they were not staring while clearly unable to look away. Derek Lawson sensed it too. The room was slipping from his control, and men like him often became cruelest in the exact moment they realized authority was no longer automatic. You know what? He said sharply, stepping back from Naomi Whitaker. I am done entertaining this. Claire Bennett immediately straightened beside him, clinging to procedure like a shield. Connor, escort her outside. Connor Blake hesitated. It was small, barely visible. But Naomi noticed. Emily noticed. Jalen noticed. Connor looked toward Naomi again, and for the first time since arriving, he actually saw her instead of the version everyone else had already decided she was. Calm posture, controlled breathing, absolute certainty, not arrogance. Certainty. Sir. Claire pressed impatiently. Connor cleared his throat. Maybe we should contact management upstairs before we escalate this further. Derek turned on him instantly. Escalate, he repeated. She is the one refusing to leave. Naomi finally spoke again, her voice softer than anyone expected. You keep calling this escalation because that sounds better than discrimination. Martin Cole scoffed from beside the lounge entrance. Oh, please. Not everything is racism. Naomi looked at him calmly. No, but this is. The sentence landed directly in the center of the room. Nobody laughed this time. Emily felt her chest tighten because suddenly every uncomfortable moment she had witnessed working at the Belmont Crest came rushing back at once. Black guests questioned more aggressively. Minority visitors asked for extra identification. Employees joking quietly about who looked expensive enough to belong. She had ignored it because she needed the paycheck. But standing there now, watching Naomi remain composed while everyone around her became uglier by the minute, silence started to feel like guilt. Claire slammed a folder down on the front desk harder than necessary. This is ridiculous. Naomi nodded slightly. It is. Derek stepped closer again, voice low and dangerous with frustration. Women like you walk in here assuming attitude can replace status. Jalen let out a stunned laugh under his breath. Wow. You really keep saying the quiet part out loud. Martin shifted uneasily now, no longer enjoying the performance as much as before. Connor rubbed the back of his neck. Even he looked embarrassed. But Derek continued digging deeper into the hole beneath his own feet. Nobody believes you are some executive, he snapped. Look at you. Naomi glanced down briefly at her cream sweater still dotted with rainwater. Then back at him. Exactly, she said quietly. Look at me. That answer hit the room harder than shouting ever could. Because the truth finally became unavoidable. Naomi had done nothing except exist calmly while black in a luxury space. And somehow that alone had triggered suspicion, hostility, and humiliation from nearly every authority figure in the lobby. Emily stepped fully out from behind the concierge desk now. Claire's eyes widened immediately. Emily, get back to your station. But Emily shook her head. No. Her voice trembled slightly, but she kept going. Her authorization is executive level. I saw it with my own eyes. Claire stared at her in disbelief. You are throwing away your career over this woman. Emily looked toward Naomi for a brief second. No, she answered quietly. I think all of you already threw yours away. The words hung there like a cracked mirror reflecting everyone exactly as they were. Derek's jaw tightened. Claire went pale. Connor looked toward the elevators again, like he suddenly wished he were somewhere else entirely. Then Naomi's phone buzzed softly in her hand. She glanced at the screen. Olivia Grant. 1 minute left. Naomi Whitaker answered the call without taking her eyes off Derek Lawson. Tell me it is done, she said quietly. Olivia Grant's voice came through calm and precise, the kind of voice built for billion-dollar negotiations and difficult people. The Crescent Plaza acquisition agreement is finalized. Legal confirmed wire transfer at 7:18 p.m. You officially control the property effective immediately. The lobby did not react at first because nobody fully understood what they had just heard. Derek frowned slightly. Claire blinked. Connor looked confused. Only Naomi remained perfectly still, like this moment had already existed in her mind long before anyone else caught up to it. "Thank you, Olivia," Naomi said softly. "Patch Richard Mallory into the line." Across the room, Martin Cole laughed uneasily. "What is this supposed to be?" Naomi slipped her phone calmly into her coat pocket. "The future of this hotel." That sentence moved through the lobby slower than the others. Heavier. More dangerous. Emily Parker stared at Naomi now with widening eyes because suddenly pieces were connecting in her mind. Crescent Plaza, the neighboring property, the expansion project. The Belmont Crest had spent 2 years trying to secure that building for a luxury retail wing and private parking structure. Without it, their entire redevelopment plan stalled. Claire finally found her voice again. "You think buying property makes you important?" Naomi looked directly at her. "No. I think your behavior tonight revealed exactly who you become when you believe someone has no power." Derek folded his arms tighter, but the confidence inside him was cracking now. "You are bluffing." Naomi nodded slightly. "That is what people usually say right before consequences arrive." The elevator doors behind the lobby opened suddenly with a soft chime. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped out quickly, scanning the room with visible urgency. Richard Mallory, general manager of the Belmont Crest. Mid-50s. Immaculate posture. The kind of executive trained to smell financial disaster before anyone else in the building noticed smoke. His eyes landed immediately on Naomi, then on Derek, then on the crowd gathering around the lobby. His expression changed instantly. "Ms. Whitaker," he said carefully, walking forward. "I was informed there may have been some misunderstanding." Derek looked confused. Claire went pale so fast, it almost looked painful. Naomi tilted her head slightly. Interesting word. Misunderstanding. Richard forced a strained smile, already collapsing under pressure. "If there has been any inconvenience, I would be happy to personally escort you upstairs." Jalen Brooks actually laughed out loud this time. "Wow, now she gets the VIP treatment." Emily looked toward Richard with disbelief. "You know her?" Richard ignored the question because the answer was already obvious. Naomi Whitaker was not just another executive. She was the founder and chief executive officer of Whitaker Urban Holdings, one of the fastest-growing commercial real estate firms in the Midwest. A woman currently controlling enough development capital to reshape half of downtown Chicago. And now she owned the exact property Belmont Crest desperately needed for survival. Derek stared at Naomi like the floor beneath him had disappeared. "Wait," he muttered. "You bought Crescent Plaza?" Naomi looked directly at him. 6 minutes ago." Silence swallowed the lobby whole. Claire took a slow step backward toward the front desk, as if distance could protect her from what was happening. Martin lowered his eyes completely now, suddenly fascinated by the melting ice inside his empty glass. Connor exhaled hard and rubbed his forehead. But Naomi was not finished. She turned calmly toward Richard Mallory while every guest in the lobby watched. "Your security staff publicly humiliated me," she said evenly. "Your employees ignored my verified reservation. And all of it happened because they decided a black woman in a sweater could not possibly belong in a room designed for wealth." Richard's face tightened with panic because there was no defense left. Only witnesses. Only consequences. Naomi stepped closer to the front desk one final time. "And now," she said quietly, "the people who tried to remove me are about to realize they handed me the most expensive apology this hotel will ever owe." Richard Mallory looked like a man trying to stop a flood with his bare hands. The polished confidence that normally lived on his face had vanished completely, replaced by the cold realization that the Belmont Crest had just insulted one of the most powerful real estate figures in Chicago in front of dozens of witnesses. "Ms. Whitaker," he began carefully, "I assure you this does not reflect the values of our hotel." Naomi Whitaker held his gaze without blinking. "Interesting," she said quietly, "because your staff seemed very comfortable reflecting those values for the last 6 minutes." Nobody in the lobby moved. Derek Lawson stood rigid near the entrance, but the authority he wore earlier was gone now. It had drained out of him the moment he realized the woman he called suspicious had enough money to reshape the block his hotel stood on. Claire Bennett looked trapped behind the front desk like she suddenly understood there was no polite corporate language capable of cleaning what had just happened. Emily Parker remained near the concierge station, hands trembling slightly, but now people in the lobby were looking at her differently too. Not as the junior employee, as the only staff member willing to tell the truth before power entered the room. Naomi slowly picked up her leather folder from the marble counter. Calm, precise, controlled, the same way surgeons handle sharp instruments. Do you know what the real problem was tonight? She asked softly. Richard swallowed hard, but did not answer. Naomi looked around the lobby instead, at the guests pretending not to stare, at Connor Blake rubbing his jaw nervously, at Martin Cole unable to meet her eyes anymore, at Derek still standing beside the door he once blocked with such confidence. The problem was never that you did not know who I was, Naomi continued. The problem was how quickly all of you decided who I could not be. Silence. Heavy and suffocating. Jalen Brooks finally spoke from near the lounge area. That part. Several guests nodded quietly. A woman near the elevators crossed her arms and shook her head in disbelief. Another man muttered, "This is unbelievable," under his breath. But Naomi was not finished. She stepped slowly toward Derek now. Not aggressively. Not emotionally. That somehow made it worse for him. You looked at me and saw a threat before you saw a guest, she said evenly. You saw my sweater before you saw my reservation. You saw my skin before you saw my status. Derek opened his mouth slightly. I did not mean it like that. Naomi tilted her head. That is usually how discrimination sounds after witnesses arrive. The sentence hit the room like a hammer wrapped in velvet. Richard immediately stepped forward, trying to regain control. Ms. Whitaker, please allow me to personally correct this situation. Naomi looked toward him. You cannot correct it. Richard froze. Naomi's voice remained soft, but every word landed with frightening precision. You called security on a black woman standing quietly in your lobby because your employees could not imagine she belonged near wealth unless she was serving it. Claire's face lost what little color remained. Connor looked down at the marble floor. Even Martin shifted farther back now, desperate to disappear into the crowd. Then Naomi delivered the sentence that would travel through that hotel long after the lobby emptied. You humiliated me in a building you manage, she said calmly. While I finalized ownership of the property your future depends on. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed loudly. Because suddenly the power dynamic had completely reversed. The woman they treated like an outsider now controlled the expansion project tied to millions of dollars in future revenue for the Belmont Crest. Naomi slipped her phone back into her coat pocket. And the saddest part, she added quietly, if I walked in wearing a designer suit instead of this sweater, none of this would have happened. Richard closed his eyes briefly like the truth itself physically hurt. Naomi looked once more toward Emily Parker. You were the only person in this lobby who remembered policy is supposed to protect dignity. Emily swallowed hard, visibly emotional now. Then Naomi turned back toward Richard Mallory one final time. So now, she said softly, let us discuss what accountability looks like when witnesses are no longer willing to stay silent. Richard Mallory looked around the lobby like a man, suddenly realizing every polished surface in the Belmont Crest had turned into a mirror. Guests were no longer whispering quietly behind wine glasses and phones. They were watching openly now, judging openly. The illusion of control the hotel depended on had cracked right down the center of the marble floor. Ms. Whitaker, Richard said carefully, voice tighter than before, I would like the opportunity to make this right. Naomi Whitaker adjusted the sleeve of her cream sweater slowly, calmly. The same sweater Derek Lawson had silently decided could not belong near wealth. That opportunity existed 6 minutes ago, she replied. Derek shifted near the entrance, face pale beneath the lobby lights. I was just doing my job. Naomi turned toward him immediately. No, she said softly. Your job was security. What you did was assumption. Connor Blake closed his eyes briefly because even he knew there was no defending what had happened anymore. Claire Bennett tried one last time to hold on to professionalism like a life raft in deep water. This entire situation has clearly been misunderstood by everyone involved. Emily Parker looked at her in disbelief. No, she said quietly. It was understood perfectly. The sentence echoed harder than anyone expected. Claire stared at her, as if betrayal hurt more than guilt. But Emily had crossed the line fear could no longer pull her back from. Jalen Brooks leaned against a marble pillar nearby, shaking his head slowly. "This woman stood here calm the whole time," he said to the surrounding guests. And somehow she became the threat. Several people nodded immediately. A middle-aged woman near the elevator spoke up for the first time. "I watched everything. She was treated differently from the second she walked in." Another guest added quietly, "This hotel has a serious problem." Richard heard every word. Worse, he understood exactly what they meant for the Belmont Crest. Luxury businesses survived on reputation, on perception, on wealthy people believing the environment felt safe, sophisticated, exclusive. But now dozens of witnesses stood inside the lobby, watching a respected black executive describe racial profiling in real time, while employees looked guilty enough to confirm every accusation without saying a word. Naomi's phone buzzed again softly. She glanced down at the screen and answered calmly. "Yes, Olivia." Olivia Grant's voice carried clearly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Press release draft is ready if needed. Also, several board members from Belmont Development have contacted our office asking to discuss the Crescent Plaza transition." Richard's face tightened instantly. Naomi noticed. So did everyone else. "Thank you," Naomi said quietly. "Hold the release for now." Derek frowned. "Press release." Naomi slipped the phone back into her coat pocket. The Belmont Crest expansion project depended on Crescent Plaza for parking access, retail frontage, and conference overflow space. She paused just long enough for the reality to settle over the room. "As of tonight, your future negotiations will go through me." Martin Cole muttered something under his breath and looked away completely now, unable to even stand near the conversation anymore. Connor loosened his tie slightly. Claire looked physically sick. Richard stepped closer toward Naomi, lowering his voice carefully. "What do you want?" Naomi looked at him for a long moment before answering. "That question should have been asked when I first walked through your doors." Silence again. Thick. Suffocating. Naomi looked around the lobby one final time. At the guests. At the employees. At the towering chandeliers hanging above a room built to make wealthy people feel powerful. "You all mistook quietness for weakness," she said evenly. "You saw dignity and assumed it needed permission to exist here." Then she turned directly toward Emily Parker. "People like you are the reason systems still have a chance to change." Emily's eyes filled immediately, but she held herself together. Richard rubbed both hands across his face slowly, exhausted now, because the truth was unavoidable. The Belmont Crest had not just humiliated the wrong guest. They had exposed exactly who they became when they thought nobody important was watching. And now the most powerful person in the room was the woman they tried to throw out of it. The Belmont Crest lobby no longer felt like a luxury hotel. It felt like the final quiet moment after a storm tears through a city and leaves people standing still, staring at what remains. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The chandeliers still glowed gold above polished marble floors. Soft jazz still floated through hidden speakers. Guests still carried expensive luggage and half-finished drinks. But the atmosphere had changed completely, because power had changed hands without Naomi Whitaker ever raising her voice. Richard Mallory stood near the center of the lobby, looking smaller than he had 10 minutes earlier. The general manager who once controlled every inch of the Belmont Crest now looked like a man watching years of reputation collapse in real time. Derek Lawson remained near the front entrance where this entire thing began. The same doorway he blocked with confidence now felt like a spotlight exposing every assumption he made the second Naomi walked inside. Claire Bennett stared silently at the front desk monitor, avoiding eye contact with everyone around her. Connor Blake loosened his collar again, exhausted by the weight of realizing he had participated in something ugly simply because authority made it easier not to question it. And Emily Parker stood quietly beside the concierge station, no longer looking afraid. Naomi adjusted the leather folder beneath her arm and looked slowly around the room one final time. "This is how systems survive," she said softly. "Not through policies. Through silence." Her voice moved across the lobby with calm precision. Every guest listened now. Even the employees who wished they could disappear. "Most discrimination does not begin with hatred," Naomi continued. "It begins with assumption. Someone decides who looks valuable. Someone decides who belongs near comfort. near wealth, near power. And everybody else follows that decision because it feels easier than asking questions. Jalen Brooks nodded slowly from near the marble pillar. That is exactly what happened. Naomi glanced toward him briefly, then toward Emily. And sometimes the only thing standing between dignity and humiliation is one person willing to speak. Emily lowered her eyes for a second, visibly emotional. But Naomi continued before the moment could become sentimental. People think power is loud, she said. They think power arrives with bodyguards and expensive suits and people announcing your name before you walk into a room. She paused. Real power does not need permission to be recognized. The sentence settled over the lobby like truth too heavy to avoid. Richard finally stepped forward carefully. Ms. Whitaker, I promise there will be accountability for tonight. Naomi looked directly at him. Good. One word. Calm. Absolute. Then she turned toward Derek Lawson. For the first time all evening, he looked genuinely ashamed. Not defensive. Not angry. Ashamed. Naomi studied him quietly before speaking. The next time a black woman walks through those doors dressed simply, remember tonight before you decide she does not belong. Derek swallowed hard, but said nothing. Because there was nothing left to say, Naomi reached for her phone as another message appeared from Olivia Grant confirming final ownership transfer documents for Crescent Plaza. The deal was complete. Permanent. Irreversible. Outside, the rain over downtown Chicago had finally started to ease. Streetlights reflected across wet pavement like scattered gold beneath the night sky. Naomi walked toward the front entrance slowly, heels tapping softly against marble while the entire lobby watched her leave. Nobody tried to stop her now. Nobody questioned whether she belonged. The same doors that once blocked her opened automatically without hesitation. But before stepping outside, Naomi turned back one final time. I did not buy the building because I was angry, she said calmly. I bought it because too many people still confuse kindness with weakness. Silence followed her words all the way to the ceiling. Then Naomi Whitaker walked into the Chicago night without looking back, while behind her an entire lobby stood motionless inside the weight of a lesson they would never forget.